Have you ever noticed a moment when a woman who is already in a relationship behaves in a way that feels different around you? Not obvious, not dramatic, nothing that could easily be pointed to and labeled, but something subtle, something beneath the surface. Maybe she laughs a little longer at your jokes than everyone else does. Maybe her attention lingers on you for a second longer than it should. Maybe the room is full of people, yet somehow the conversation between the two of you feels strangely private. And that raises an uncomfortable but fascinating question. What happens when attraction exists where it technically should not? Human emotions do not always follow the neat rules that society creates. People can be loyal, committed, and sincere, and still experience curiosity, fascination, or emotional pull towards someone unexpected. This is where things become psychologically complex. Because when a woman feels a strong pull towards someone outside her relationship, she rarely expresses it openly. Most of the time, she hides it even from herself. The feelings appear indirectly, through behavior, microexpressions, subtle changes in tone, attention patterns, and emotional tension. So the signs are not loud, they are quiet, subtle, sometimes almost invisible. But once you understand the psychology behind them, the patterns begin to reveal themselves. And today, we are going to explore 10 of those hidden signals. Not to encourage manipulation, not to promote dishonesty, but to understand the deeper psychological dynamics that sometimes unfold between people. And clarity creates better choices. Before we go any further, it is important to establish something clearly. This conversation is not about encouraging anyone to interfere in someone else's relationship. It is not about pursuing someone who has made a commitment to another person. Human relationships are built on trust, and trust deserves respect. The purpose of this discussion is awareness, understanding human behavior, recognizing emotional signals that people sometimes communicate unconsciously. Life places us in complicated emotional environments, workplaces, social circles, friend groups, shared communities. Attraction can appear in unexpected places. Understanding the psychology behind these dynamics helps people respond with maturity rather than confusion. And more importantly, it helps you maintain your own integrity. But ethical awareness is even more powerful. Now that we have that foundation, we can explore the deeper psychology behind why these situations happen at all. Most people assume that if someone is in a relationship, their emotional world becomes completely closed to other possibilities. But human psychology does not work that way. Relationships satisfy many needs: companionship, stability, intimacy, shared life direction, but they do not always satisfy every psychological need at every moment in time. People still crave validation, novelty, attention, emotional stimulation. Sometimes they crave feeling seen in a way they have not felt in a while. Attachment theory explains something important here. When individuals spend long periods in a stable relationship, emotional routines form. Conversations become predictable. Interactions follow familiar patterns. That stability is valuable. But the human brain is also wired to notice novelty. A new personality, a different perspective, someone who sees a side of you that your partner no longer notices. And when that happens, the emotional brain can begin to experience a quiet internal conflict. On one side, there is loyalty. On the other side, there is curiosity. The result is a psychological push and pull. This is why hidden attraction rarely looks like open flirtation. Instead, it appears in subtle behavioral signals that often confuse both people involved. The woman may not consciously plan these behaviors. Many of them are automatic responses generated by the emotional brain. Which brings us to the first sign. Have you ever noticed how attention behaves differently when someone is secretly fascinated by you? When a woman feels drawn towards someone she technically should not pursue, her attention becomes selective. In group conversations, she may appear engaged with everyone, but somehow her focus repeatedly returns to you. You might notice it during storytelling. The room laughs, but her eyes immediately look to see your reaction. You might notice it when someone else speaks. She listens politely, but when you speak, something shifts in her posture. This change is often extremely subtle. Her body leans a little closer. Her voice softens slightly. Her eye contact becomes more sustained. It is quieter than that. A brief pause when your eyes meet. a moment where she looks away quickly, then looks back again. These small behaviors reveal a psychological truth. The brain prioritizes what it finds emotionally stimulating. When someone becomes psychologically important, attention follows them automatically. But here is where most people misunderstand the signal. Attention alone does not mean obsession. Some people are naturally attentive conversationalists. The real clue is contrast. How does she behave around you, compared to how she behaves around others? That difference often tells the real story. And this leads to another fascinating behavior pattern. Have you ever noticed how some people ask questions that feel unusually personal, but somehow deeper than normal conversation? When a woman feels secretly fascinated by someone, curiosity becomes one of the first emotional leaks. She may begin asking questions that explore your inner world. What motivates you? How you think about relationships? What experiences shaped you? What dreams you have for the future? On the surface, it looks like friendly conversation, but psychologically, curiosity serves a deeper function. The mind is trying to build an emotional map. It wants to understand you. It wants to know how compatible your emotional worlds might be. People do this unconsciously when they feel drawn to someone, and interestingly, the questions often arrive in small waves. She might ask something deeper, then quickly return to casual conversation, almost as if she realizes she revealed too much interest. This pattern of approach and retreat reveals the inner tension she may be feeling. Which brings us to a very subtle but powerful signal: microjealousy. When someone feels secretly drawn to you, the emotional brain sometimes reacts when other women enter the dynamic. But because she cannot openly express that feeling, the reaction appears in extremely small ways. Maybe another woman compliments you. Maybe someone else in the group laughs at your joke. Suddenly you notice a small shift in her expression. Her smile tightens slightly. She becomes quieter for a moment. She changes the subject. These reactions are not dramatic displays of jealousy. They are brief emotional flickers, moments where the subconscious mind reveals more than the conscious mind intends. Psychologically, this happens because attraction activates a primitive competitive instinct. Even when someone is already committed elsewhere, the emotional brain can still react to perceived rivals. But here is where the situation becomes even more complicated. Because when a woman feels attraction that conflicts with her relationship commitment, she often develops mixed signals. One day she seems unusually warm toward you. The next day she becomes distant. Conversations feel engaging, then suddenly restrained. This emotional rhythm confuses many people, but the psychology behind it is actually very logical. Part of her mind enjoys the emotional stimulation of interacting with you. Another part of her mind feels guilty for enjoying it. So the brain attempts to regulate the situation. When the emotional pull becomes strong, she pulls back. When the distance becomes uncomfortable, she moves closer again. This push and pull dynamic is one of the most common signs of internal emotional conflict. And if you pay close attention, you may notice that the changes often happen after particularly engaging interactions, a deep conversation, a moment of intense eye contact, a shared laugh that felt slightly too intimate. After those moments, distance appears, not because the connection disappeared, but because the mind is trying to regain balance. Now here is where things become even more interesting. Behavior often changes dramatically depending on the environment. In group settings, a woman who feels hidden attraction may behave extremely controlled. Her tone remains neutral. Her physical distance stays appropriate. She may even appear slightly colder toward you than toward others. But then something fascinating happens when the environment changes. Imagine the same woman speaking with you one-on-one. The conversation suddenly flows more easily, warmer. She laughs more freely. Her eye contact becomes more comfortable. This contrast reveals something important. When social pressure disappears, authentic emotion becomes easier to express. But when other people are present, self-protection activates. Because hidden attraction often feels risky. Risky to her relationship, risky to her reputation, risky to the emotional stability she has built. So her behavior adapts to the environment. Another powerful signal appears in the world of digital communication. Texting behavior reveals patterns that face-to-face conversations sometimes hide. Have you ever received a message that seemed slightly unnecessary? A message that could have waited until the next group interaction? Maybe she sends you something she found interesting. Maybe she asks your opinion about something small. Maybe she responds to your social media story with thoughtful engagement. These interactions often appear casual, but psychologically, they serve an important function. They create a private communication channel, a small emotional space separate from the larger social environment. And interestingly, the tone of those messages often feels different from how she communicates publicly. More relaxed, more playful, more curious. This does not necessarily mean she intends to cross any boundaries. Sometimes the emotional brain simply enjoys the connection. But the contrast between public and private interaction can reveal how someone truly feels. And then there is another signal that is incredibly subtle but extremely revealing. Emotional mirroring. Humans unconsciously mirror people they feel connected to. Speech patterns, body language, facial expressions. When someone feels fascinated by another person, their nervous system begins synchronizing with that person's energy. You might notice that she begins using phrases you often use. Her laughter matches your rhythm. Her posture shifts when yours shifts. These behaviors are rarely intentional. They are signs that the subconscious mind is highly attuned to your presence. But this is where most observers make a critical mistake. They see one or two of these behaviors and immediately assume romantic obsession. Human behavior is far more nuanced. Real psychological patterns appear through consistency. Not one moment, not one conversation, but repeated subtle signals over time. Which brings us to the emotional conflict that often exists beneath the surface. When attraction appears in a complicated context, the mind attempts to create psychological distance. You might notice sudden changes. She avoids long eye contact after an intense conversation. Interactions more formal. She becomes more careful about physical proximity. These behaviors are not rejection. Often they are attempts to maintain internal boundaries. Because attraction alone does not determine someone's choices. Values matter. Commitments matter. Self-respect matters. And many people choose to control their behavior even when emotions become complicated. This is where emotional maturity becomes important for everyone involved. Recognizing subtle signals does not mean acting on them. Understanding attraction does not mean pursuing it. Sometimes the most powerful response is simple awareness, respecting someone's relationship, respecting your own integrity, allowing emotions to exist without turning them into actions that could create harm. Because relationships built on secrecy and conflict rarely lead to stability. Connections deserve honesty. If a relationship ends naturally and two people find themselves free to explore something real, that is a different situation. But when commitments exist, integrity matters. And awareness helps people navigate these situations with clarity instead of confusion. So if you ever notice subtle signals like the ones we discussed today, the most important question is not what you can gain from them. The real question is what they reveal about human psychology, about attention, about curiosity, about the quiet ways attraction sometimes appears in complex social environments. Understanding these patterns allows you to observe human behavior with greater depth. It allows you to recognize emotional signals without misinterpreting them. And most importantly, it allows you to respond with maturity. Because true confidence is not about chasing every opportunity. It is about knowing when to step back with dignity.